Hey guys, what's up? This is Zach here. I'm going over ACSM, or American College of Sports Medicine, Chapter 4. Side of the resources for the personal trainer, 5th edition. This chapter is introducing the principles of biomechanics. In order for a personal trainer to better develop workouts and exercise routines, it is very important for them to understand biomechanics. It helps you develop routines that won't lead to injury. It lets you have a better understanding about how the body works so that you can avoid injury. Um, this is a pretty short chapter. Um, so one of the things that I picked up in here was a sticking point. It explains what the sticking point is, and it's a good thing to understand how to explain that to a client if they're interested in why, like, a certain like in a bicep curl, why at a certain point it seems a lot more difficult than at other points. If you have an understanding of biomechanics, you can explain to them the sticking point and principles at play. Um, so pretty much what biomechanics is, it's just pretty much breaking the body systems down into like levers and fulcrums and how those are being utilized to lift weights and measuring force, training load and stuff like that. So a lever is a simple machine consisting of a rigid bar, use about a point of rotation or a fulcrum. Here's a few things that I'll go over, a few basic ideas in this 4th chapter, and a lot of what I might explain might kind of sound irrelevant, but it paints the big picture. So there's a class 1 lever, there's class 2 lever, and a class 3 lever, and the difference in these is the fulcrum point, and so it's important to understand that. There's mechanical laws of motion, which is very important to understand. The first law is the law of inertia, and it explains the physical nature of a force. Inertia is defined as a resistance an object has to change its state of motion, or its velocity. To overcome an object's inertia, a force must be applied. An object's linear or straight line inertia is proportional to its mass. The second law is the law of acceleration. It provides a mathematical equation to calculate the size of magnitude of a force. A force is proportional to the product of an object's mass multiplied by its acceleration. So force is measured in newtons. So force equals m times a, mass times acceleration. Law of reaction is the third law. It explains that a force cannot act alone on an object. Any force acting on an object is always accompanied by another reaction force. This force is equal in magnitude and opposite in direction to the force. So those are some good laws, physics laws to understand as a personal trainer. In table 4.1 in the ACSM book, it gives a good example or definition of linear movement and angular movement as it applies to each of those laws. Vector quantities, pretty much just being able to put an exact number. A vector quantity, or no, a scalar quantity is pretty much putting an exact number on something. So like how many students in a class. It's important to understand what a vector quantity is. It's one that requires both a magnitude and a direction to define. Some more things in here. It's a pretty simple chapter, but there are some complexities in it. A lot of this stuff you won't be using exactly like the formulas, and you won't be in the gym measuring a client's angle of his legs throughout the motions and stuff. It's just a good idea to have a basic understanding of biomechanics so that you can put it together and develop training plans that will not hurt your client. And there's a lot of equations in here that are useful, especially if you want to be really specific about it. But pretty much what's really important about this chapter is that you get a basic understanding of biomechanics. You don't need to be able to write out the equations and measure angles and stuff like that, like out of your head, or it's not that in depth in what you're going to be doing as a personal trainer. It just requires a basic understanding of these principles. So it's a good chapter to read, obviously. And there is a lot of great information in here. It One thing that it's really important is a training load, measuring your training load. So uh the mechanical work. So mechanical work is defined as a product of the magnitude of a force that creates a change in position and the linear displacement that defines the change in position. So mechanical work is force times shoot, I'm blanking right now. Force times displacement. So that is really good to be able to calculate so that you know. So like here's an example. Strength training routine, 3 sets, 10 reps, 200 pounds. As opposed to an endurance training routine, 3 sets, 15 reps, and 150 pounds. In order to figure out the overall mechanical work, you have to know the equations, which is pretty easy. Mechanical work, force times displacement. And then throw that together so that depending on your client's desires and your client's goals, that you can develop a training plan that meets those goals. So like if this person wanted a training routine that produces the most volume of training, it would be the endurance training routine because it produces the most volume. Another thing that's important is that is positive work and negative work. It's important to understand what that is. And then also something that's really good is being able to measure mechanical power. And power is force times displacement divided by time. So it throws time in the equation there, and these are the important equations to know so that you can pretty much get the most bang for your buck. So I'm not going to dive too much into it because it's just what I'm doing with these videos is just trying to give you a general overview of the important aspects throughout each chapter. Active muscle force and passive muscle force is important to understand too, because during training you're going to have an active muscle, but there's also passive muscle force that is generated by other muscles that you aren't targeting directly. That is an important aspect to understand. And yeah, another reason why it's really important to understand biomechanics is so that you're able to analyze somebody's lifting form. If you have a basic understanding of biomechanics, then when somebody's lifting something incorrectly, you're able to kind of pick up on it more. In addition to all the other training that you receive on actually how to do lifts and stuff. If you understand biomechanics, it is really easy it is more simple to notice flaws or notice improvements that can be made in form. So with that, and there's the last thing in this chapter that I'm going to go over is walking gait. There's a bunch of steps to walking gait, and there's also common gait abnormalities associated with biomechanical responses such as a painful gait or an antalgic gait, stiff hip or knee, which is an arthrogenic gait, an equinus gait, and then a short leg gait. And these are pretty important to understand. Yeah, so chapter 4 is a pretty basic chapter. The next chapter is exercise physiology, which it gets into a lot more interesting for me. I'm a triathlete and I like VO2 max and numbers and stuff and the respiratory system. So it gets into a lot of that, which is completely fascinating for me. It gets into the Krebs cycle, anaerobic metabolism, aerobic metabolism, pulmonary ventilation, the good stuff, in my opinion, the stuff that you really, really need to understand in order to develop an effective training routine for different types of clients. So, hopefully within a few days, I'll have a review of Chapter 5 up, and hopefully it'll be better than this one. So I wish you guys the best. Again, this was a review of Chapter 4, Biomechanics, out of the American College of Sports Medicine, Resources for the Personal Trainer, 5th edition. Keep it pimping, stay awesome, and love as much as possible. Thank you.